Okay, everybody out there in YouTube land, welcome to another episode of Role Player with 1,000 Faces. I am your humble host, the founder and head game master here at Manufactured Myth Legerdemain, Matt Yancik. And thank you very much for tuning in to the big program and joining us tonight. But as you know, I never get straight to the meat and potatoes. I always start with a little appetizer first. And first of all, I'd actually, even before the appetizer, I just want to start with a thank you and just say thank you to those of you out there that have been liking and subscribing and spreading the word. I've said this a million times before. I'm a small channel, and I'm obviously not a million subscribers out there, but what I really like is the small little community that we have, and the fact that I can hop into my Discord and I can talk to a lot of you individually. That is something that makes me really happy. It makes me feel like I'm really actually making a difference and at least like interacting with other people. So thank you very much for your subscriptions. If you are interested in following us on other platforms, while most of those platforms are still out there, you can check us out on Twitter and on Facebook. On Twitter, I am CatWhoWalks99. On Facebook, I'm Manufactured Myth Legerdemain. I am embarrassed to say that neither one of those get updated with much more than cat pictures. That is because recently I've been taking a little bit of a break from the media because I'm kind of feeling like a little bit of a sense of addiction. I'm feeling like a little sense of like, oh, I got to get the tweet out. I got to get 10 likes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's for the birds. So if you're really interested in following us, please do look for any updates and look for any stuff that I create here on the YouTube channel. This is my preferred method of communication. That and email. I think you can go somewhere in there and you can email me if you wanna say something. But anyway, thank you so much for your viewership. I just wanted to say that we've been hitting kind of I feel like I've got a little bit of a hat trick kind of going here with the last 3 episodes, this one included. A few weeks ago, I talked to Jess Pendley from Underground Oracle Games, who is doing a Kickstarter for Cypher System. She and her partner in crime, Keith Penley, were actually in the process of creating a really cool game for Cypher System. After I don't know, I heard something happen with the OGL or something. I don't know. I'm not sure. You may all know something more about that. But they were kind of creating new stuff for Cypher System, and they were kind of getting that out there. And they've been doing that for a long time, kind of taking the indie route to create and publish their material. And then in my last episode, I talked to Keith Baker, who I think we all kind of know. He is the father of Eberron and the Eberron campaign setting, and also he runs his own Together Studios indie game publishing company, and they kind of represent like two sides of a coin of like independent publishing. And I guess that's not the greatest analogy because I was going to say this is the third side of the coin. I'm trying to think of another analogy that involves 3. This is the third side of the triangle, maybe, of publishing. Tonight, I've got a couple folks on from Wet Ink Games, and I'm not sure. I have to be honest here. I hadn't heard of Wet Ink Games until about a year and a half ago. I was browsing my local game store here in Cambridge, and I saw a game sitting on the shelf that completely caught me. So the truth is that these days, this old man here, this old, bitter, angry, hard to impress man, is not very often struck or taken by things that I see on the shelf. So I've got a zillion games here behind me. And to be honest, it used to be a bigger collection, and I started to sort of whittle it down and get rid of the stuff that, is cool and is interesting, but maybe I'm not, I don't feel is so unique or is really offering something new or inventive. The game that I saw on the shelves is called Never Going Home. And I picked up a few of the book. There are more, but I picked up like just barely browsing through them. You know, looking at the artwork, reading a little bit of the material inside. I was suitably impressed, and just I didn't even look at the price. I just took it over to the counter. I plunked down my I was going to make a credit card joke. I was going to say I plunked down like my friend's credit card, but I plunked down my own credit card, my mom's credit card, and then I ran to the park, and I sat and I breezed through the books, and I was really excited by what I found inside. So Wet Ink Games, a team of Brandon K. Aten and Matthew Orr. I've been meaning to speak to them for a while now, and things have sort of aligned in a way where all sorts of stuff is going on, and I am able to bring them on tonight. So you don't want to hear from me anymore. Let's just get to the meat and potatoes of tonight's program. Matthew and Brandon, thank you so much for coming on tonight. How is it going for the two of you? How are you doing?
Yeah. I mean, thanks for having us. This is great. I mean, we always love to talk about games and the stuff that we make and stuff a lot of our friends in the industry are making, and just chat about the hobby. I mean, it's what it's all about. So, but again, thanks for having us, and yeah, I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, oh, I was just gonna say I love to hear a story about somebody that like I didn't know who you were until I saw your book in a friendly local game store, and then I bought it, and
Yep.
it's like that's great. I'm glad that your friendly local game store was stocking indie games. That's it's great.
That's half the
So
battle.
Yeah, they're a really good shop, and I'm always impressed by their selection. And to be honest, you know, I love D&D. This is my mantra. I love D&D, but you know, after decades of playing, I am really in the market for things that really challenge me or pique my interest. And for sure, Never Going Home definitely did that. So right now, I know you have a Kickstarter running for Never Going Home, and I just want to sort of get that out there because the algorithm says that in the first 10 minutes, that's when things either they run and then they start to taper off. But there we go, available at Kickstarter right now in the links below. But before we kind
it's
of
called the
get,
beginning and the end.
that's right, that is right.
But
It is the alpha and
the
omega.
That's right.
yeah, Never Going Home. You can find it that way. Search on the Kickstarter makes it easy to search. So
I
and
I highly recommend it. I've got a link to it in the description below, and we're going to talk about it here in a few minutes. But before we kind of get into that, what's interesting to me and what struck me about the game, at least you know, speaking specifically about Never Going Home, was maybe the topic and the choice of genres and the mixing of genres. Tell me, did you guys maybe grow up like playing RPGs that were kind of, I don't want to say alternative, because to me, RPGs should have all kinds of genres within them, right? But like, did you grow up playing more traditional stuff or?
So there's a, I mean, that's a big loaded question because, as a game of collective storytelling, anyone who sits there and plays a game on the playground is, engaged in collective storytelling, and that's one of the things that we've talked about in our games. Like everyone is a player, so it's not just the narrator and the players, it's everyone is a player. I mean, personally, I grew up playing all kinds of games, board games, card games, and RPGs. um and like my earliest RPG that I ever played was old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles RPG by Palladium Books. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness. Um, I played that
Eric Woodchuck.
the summer before
Woodchuck.
sixth grade.
Oh
Yep,
man.
Eric Woodsick. Eric, and then that blossomed into all kinds of other RPGs. But like that game, there was so much fun that came out of that game for me, and led into other games that Palladium had done. I actually sought out a lot of their games, like their Rifts RPG, and eventually that blossomed into like relationship and friendship with a lot of the people there at Palladium Books. So, but yeah, grew up playing all kinds of games.
How about you, Matthew? Were you a gamer as a youth, or?
I mean, yes. I mean, I think Brendan mentioned board games and stuff, and that was primarily what we played. I do remember um my dad had a lot of the Avalon Hill board games, and
Yes.
so we would play on I feel like it must have been a simplified level. We never got into the really high level
Yeah.
things, but we used to play the old Starship Troopers game. Like
Yes.
he and I would play the Starship Troopers game,
Yeah.
and so and so that hex map, and
Mm-hmm.
like you've got a little stack of cardboard chits, and that's your
Mm-hmm.
one scout and four soldiers, and then like the medic, and you're moving the stack around on the grids. And in that Starship Troopers game, there's like a separate pad that you would draw your, if you were playing the arachnids, you'd have to draw your hive that's under the
Right.
ground, and then you're not on the board until you pop up out of the ground, and then you're where is your hive. It's hidden information because you've got it on your little player sheet. So I mean, all of those elements are obviously, that's a board game, but it contains so much of the same vibe, I guess, to what role-playing games are. My first role-playing game, and it was from TSR. It was the Marvel Superheroes game that came in like a yellow box, and that was another one that my dad and I tried. That one we tried to play together, but it didn't really take.
Yeah.
I was too young, and he was not really into role-playing games, and so like that one we never really played that game. But the box is somewhere in the game shelf up there in the house. So I mean, I brushed up against Brandon and the TMNT stuff, and that's how I met Brandon, and that's a whole other tale. But really the second game, you ask like, did you play the normal stuff? And I'm like, no, I didn't actually, because I played that TSR game, and then the first campaign that I actually played is one that I made up. I was just like, got out my grid paper, and I drew the mountain
Oh,
range, and I drew the
interesting.
river, and like
Yeah.
my friends got around the picnic table at the apartment complex, and I'm like, I don't know, here, roll these dice, and then oh, that's a bunch of successes. So yeah, you beat the monsters. Great. In the next grid, you find more trees,
Yeah.
and we did that for afternoon after afternoon after afternoon, and so it wasn't until college that I played D&D.
Yeah.
And so I came to that one late, but I'd played these other games from a young age.
It's so interesting that you guys mentioned those two games, right? So the first game I ever bought, and I actually bought it using like good behavior credits in 6th grade from Mr. Mano, my 6th grade teacher, was the Marvel Superheroes Yellow Box game. And I also played around that time. I had been playing the Starship Troopers game, not understanding it at all. And I've been playing the James Bond game. I forget who the publisher was, but a buddy of mine been playing that and Tunnels and Trolls. And I still hadn't, you mentioned the Marvel Superheroes game, and I still didn't have a real understanding for what a role-playing game was. And so when you open up that Marvel Superheroes game, there's a fold-out map, and I thought of it as, and it was like, one was like a mall and the other was like a park or something, and I played it like
definitely a lot of outside streets and front brownstone front stoops and stuff like that.
You're probably right. I'm probably wrong about the park. It was probably the brownstone.
I mean, there's probably a park
stuff.
also in that outside environment. It was probably supposed to be New York, right? Because that's
I
where
would assume. Yeah,
all the Marvel books take place.
I would assume. And I think what I tried to do was I tried to play a board game with like my sister, and like you, I had the experience where I didn't quite get it. And what's funny is my brain couldn't really figure that stuff out. And it wasn't until, so Brandon, you mentioned TMNT. At that time, I was big into the Mirage Press original like TMNT comics, like before they became it. And I was also into Robotech. And
Yes, no,
Kevin Ciambietta released, like, I think within like
that was
probably
the
the
first
same.
game I ever bought.
Yes, Robotech was the first game I bought, took home, and I said, I'm gonna learn this. And I like just sat down and I like took notes and I read for like 3 days about how to run an RPG, and that kind of taught me how to play. I feel like we're probably from about the same
Oh yeah,
era, same
Yeah.
time of gaming.
We all played the same
Absolutely.
games as kids, apparently, or as younger people.
What at that point then were you both? It sounds like you, Matthew, were sort of taking on the role of a game master, and maybe Brandon, were you doing the same thing, like with your purchase of TMNT, or were you looking for people to run it for you, or?
Well, so the like we used to do, oh gosh, back in the day, you know, I'd sit there and call some buddies. You know, I'd call a friend, and you know they'd like, you know, you put in the number and like do a little three-way or conference call or whatever.
Oh
Some of
yeah.
my other friends, and you know, we'd sit there and do Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles over the phone. But at
Oh
that point,
wow.
like I wasn't running. I was, you know, I was primarily a player at that point. And yeah, but eventually, you know, I was able to do that and actually, you know, run games for friends at, you know,
Mm,
local youth group, or doing things that, you know, just having people over to my house or things like that. But um yeah, the um and you know, at that point I was like, I have no idea how these games are
mm,
made, how they're run. Like I see there's someone who's kind of telling the story, and so I always I always cherished the sections of those books that would say like, hey, here's how combat is run, and you know, it's
mm,
like all scripted out or something like that.
mm,
Or like, you know, you go into the convenience store and the lights go out, you know. And I loved being able to see kind of like, okay, it's kind of like a play. You're
mm,
all sitting there playing a part. This is your character, but instead of saying like I just do this, it's like, no, now you have to roll the dice and see if you succeed, or you know, something's in your way. Like just the way that stuff was kind of scripted was always fun to see. And then being able to compare it to like another game or
mm,
another company and seeing how they do it.
mm,
And so you're like, okay, they're using some of this verbiage to,
mm,
you know, obscure a die roll, or to justify a failure or a success, and just kind of helped with some of that storytelling.
mm. And so at that time, you had mentioned that you met through TMNT or through Palladium. Were you?
Ta-
I take it there's a story
Tangentially,
behind this. Okay.
yeah, Matt, I'll let you kick this one off.
Uh, so this was not. You could kind of almost lump all the memories together, but definitely like I had met Brandon, you know, we went to the same middle school, so like
Mm,
you know, there's not that many kids to run into at a medium-sized middle school, so you know, Brandon played the tuba, so like he's a big loud presence, and then like
What?
and I the first time I remember meeting Brandon, it is in the line. It was a fire drill. Like
mm,
everybody's outside, and like I'm talking to people that I know, and then here comes somebody else who wasn't in my class, who's not obeying the rules and staying in his line. He's coming over to my line because he wants to talk to other people in my class that he knows from band,
mm,
and that's where I first met Brandon. So it didn't take too many. At some point, it was like, oh, he's got a TMNT book. What is that? Like I had already sort of halfway knew what a role playing game was, but not really. And I'm like, great, we're gonna go off and we're gonna make characters. And
mm,
like he had the book, and like I'm looking through it, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, but we're not doing that. We're going over here on this adventure in the woods. And like I'm like, okay, well, this is fun. Someday
mm,
we'll play TMT in the woods, you know, like, oh, now
And
we're
here
going
we
over
are.
here to the neighborhood pool, and this guy's gonna sneak into the neighborhood pool, and we're gonna watch him and laugh. And I'm like, this is all very fun for a middle schooler to do, but when will we make TMT characters?
right.
It's like, so yeah, that is the story of TMT bringing us together. Is I was trying to play and he was having fun. Um,
Right.
on that day, it wasn't until later that we played games together.
Right.
but that was definitely the point to bring us together.
Were you both thinking at this time that they were just sort of a diversion, or were you planning? Like, I remember back to when I was playing games, say, in middle and high school. I never in a million years thought this is what I was going to do. I would sit down and I would kind of type up worlds and settings and I'd arrange stuff. But I don't think it ever occurred to me that I was going to try to or wanted to try to work and design games. And so I was always planning to go off and do something else. And I did, and I still do something else, as a matter of fact. Were you thinking, okay, this is what I'm set on, going to do gaming? Or was it just a diversion?
Oh, Matt, you start this one, man.
Well, it's funny. I don't think I've ever. I've not really had to. I've been asked that before. So it's it's interesting. I don't connect a memory of like obviously like I know what books are. My house is full of my parents' house that I grew up in was full of books, and like somebody has to write them, and I knew that, and I had made like board games because we played so many board games. I had taken like a manila folder and you like fold it open and then like draw the like Candyland style route, and it's like a roll and move style game. And I had cards, and if you drew the skeleton card, you were out of the game. Ha 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 ha. And then you take all your little cards that you've done on construction paper and you put them in your back in your manila folder, and that's your game. Like I'd done that in grade school. So like I had made games, and it was sort of in the making stuff and being creative was sort of just a assumed part of like my growing up. My parents would write poems, or we were involved in the church stuff, so there was always like costumes to make for the Christmas pageant and that kind of stuff. So participating in like an artsy kind of life was sort of just background radiation, I guess. But I don't know if I connected that to gaming when I first brushed up against it. I had described like playing a game with my friends in like the playground and stuff like that, like sitting at the picnic table. But like that wasn't like I wasn't I any campaign planning or campaign notes that I made was just to play with them. It wasn't a thought of like that it would be a quote unquote real game sometime in the future. So yeah, I don't know when that element came in. Probably not until much later.
Yeah, I think for me, like I had seen these things, seen these games that were attached to properties like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Robotech, and I played some Dungeons and Dragons and stuff in middle school, and you know um, growing up during like the Satanic Panic as well, like where people were still like at church are like, oh, can't play Dungeons and Dragons, that's of the devil or whatever, but I'd sit there and we'd bring Hero Quest to a an event or something, and people are like, this looks very much like
Looks like
Dungeons and Dragons, and
D&D.
I'm like, it's Milton Bradley or Hasbro.
It's published by Mattel.
It's
Yeah, it's
Barker
like
Brothers.
yeah, it's like,
Yeah,
come on,
whatever.
and they're like, okay, that kind of stuff. But again, I never, it again was not at all something that was on my radar as something that like, oh yeah, you can do this. Even in college, it was up until my very first publication was in Rifter 28, which was a quarterly magazine that Palladium used to put out a long time ago, and that was in 2004, and that's after I had met Kevin Simbita, um, and in 2004, I like at Origins, I had talked to Kevin and said, hey, I have this idea for I have this idea for something for Heroes Unlimited, and he's like, that sounds great, write it up and submit it. And that was the very first thing I'd ever done as for freelance. Never got ever got paid for that, and it was like, huh, okay. And so at that point, it was like, sure, I'll be a perpetual freelancer or something like that. Again, even then, it was not something that was on my radar. I mean, now it's not my full-time gig. But it's again, aspirationally, and knowing people that we know, knowing designers, knowing other people who have started their own companies and partnered with other companies, um, just to do some really really cool things. I think um, we kind of punch above our weight. We've
Yeah.
joked about that for a while, that Wet Ink Games punches above its weight. Um, and we know where we want to go. We always have our eye on kind of the next step in our growth process.
Mm.
Um, so that's yeah, like would be great to to be a game designer and a game producer when I grow up.
And I would actually say, like you mentioned, punching above your weight, and I think first of all, I think that's a great expression to use for your work in particular. And again, I want everyone to know, I'm not I'm not paid for this gig. Goodness knows I'm not. Like I bring people on who are creating really interesting stuff, and honestly, like when I so so I think some people might look and they see, oh, it's a soft cover and it's got a cheaper price tag than a super duper hardcover
Hmm.
D&D or like it's, you know what I mean? They may look at
Hmm.
that, but what's interesting to me, and excuse me, maybe this is something that I do intuitively now, or I've trained myself as a teacher to do, but I'm not looking for I'm looking for the substance and the spirit behind everything. And when I saw it, like this takes taste. Like, let's say that, some people might attribute, they look at a game and they say, oh, it's got really good artwork. That's all that that's what sells it or whatever. But the truth is, lots of people have great artwork. Lots of people have mediocre artwork. Lots of people can't tell the difference. And for someone to select an artist or to select a particular font, to select the layout on the cover, to select how to make the back look appealing, that all takes taste and creativity. And there's kind of like there's no cost to that. Like I think
Yeah.
that is something that is extremely like not underrated. It's almost like unthought of. I think when people, it's kind of like taking. It's not what you have; it's what you do with it. And I feel like the game that I have here and that I highly recommend, and again, I'm not paid to say any of this stuff, that I highly recommend that you folks, if you're watching, at least go check it out. Maybe grab the core book or something. It's like $20. It's super cheap.
Yeah.
Or at least I got
And
it for that. It's a
and
great.
and and you definitely hit the nail on the head. We've made a lot of very deliberate choices with this game
Mm,
line. You mentioned the price point, $20. Growing up, like I said, we would go to the hobby shop or whatever, and we'd see hardback,
mm,
D&D books on the shelf for 30, $35, $50 or whatever we would see. And or God forbid we turn around and be like, oh, this miniature looks really awesome. How much for this miniature? And it's
mm,
like, well, that's $13 for your little army man.
yeah.
Um,
The
and
fancy army man.
it's a fancy army man, but you know what I mean. It's
Mm,
like
I know.
we said, okay, for this game line, like we wanted this to be very accessible.
Yeah.
So
Well,
price point was one. Um, the you mentioned the soft cover that goes into our choice, our print on demand versions that you get on Drive Through RPG. They are the standard print on demand that they have there, but all of the stuff that you get in a retail store, or all of the ones that you get from us for at conventions or Kickstarters, we do offset printing because we have a lot more control over what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
So the books that you're holding right now are a matte soft cover, and I'm a very
Very
tactile person.
nice. Yeah,
Like
they
I
they
hold
do.
that book. Hmm. And that was a choice that we made.
Mm,
And you actually, when you were talking about it, did something that Matt and I
yeah.
had talked about for a long time. If the art on the front of the book makes you pick it up and flip it over to look at the back, the art on the front has done its job.
mm.
If the back does tells you enough or gets you so interested that you want to open it up, then the back cover has done its job. And that's, it was funny. I'm watching
Yeah,
you talk
yeah.
about it, and I was like, there it is.
There it is.
It's well.
It is.
Oh, go ahead, Matt. I'm
It's
sorry.
deliberate, right? To give you just enough to like, well, what is this about? Like, I don't remember off the top of my head what exactly it says on the back of that particular book, but it's not overly long.
No,
It's just the
exactly.
highlights. And if that sounds intriguing, yeah, open
It's
it up and see what's more.
what's interesting, and I viewers, if you're tuning in and you're subscribed to me, then you know that I'm assuming that you're like me and you're very nerdy and you're very interested in even the subtle nuances of the way that a game is laid out or a cover is made or thoughts and decisions are made. Here's what I think the game, like as far as the cover and the front and back do really well. So like, first of all, you were dead on. Like, this is a very I'm so sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I don't have like something to cut to for this, but first of all, this immediately evokes. It's kind of like Frank Lloyd Wright. It's not on the mountain; it's of the mountain. And so when I look at this cover, I don't feel that this cover is just like some beautiful modern artwork depicting World War I. This artwork, to me, has a very like European World War I from World War I kind of feel to it, right? So of course it's got modern trappings in here and some sensibilities and things that we would maybe think of today and maybe they wouldn't have thought of back then. But the line work and the artist that you selected to do it just remarkably grabs your attention. It's got the title, and that's enough to make me go, what is this? And as you said, I flip it over and there's something unusual that you've kind of done here in my opinion as well. So first of all, you've got a white cover as opposed to like a dark cover with like the white writing. Second of all, you've purposely chosen not to just fill this whole backside. Like if you look at the back of like a D&D book, and nothing against D&D, but it's got a certain look and feel and style.
Oh yeah.
Or a standard book, it's just filled, right? What you did was you took a minimal amount of writing with the title, and you've got like 5 sort of bullet points here. And you have this very beautiful and kind of like evocative and also like it's line work piece of art. I can't do it because it's
You're on it.
And so when I see that and I see like the little textures, it just makes me want to like know what this is about. And that to me, this kind of reminds me of like Ralph Bakshi's Wizards kind of artwork. It also reminds me of the stuff I would see when I'm watching, or I'm sorry, when I'm reading like Charlie Hebdo, like the French newspaper. Very, very much reminds me of that. And it draws me in.
So
you were hitting all the notes.
Yeah, you mean you
Not
you were
paid,
saying
folks.
the things. Yeah. So what we have to talk about Charlie's art.
We have to,
because
as well.
Charlie Fergus Avery is the artist. He did all of those pieces, and he is responsible for all the line work that you're talking about. And this is sort of the origin story of Never Going Home. It involves him to a huge degree, and we'll tell you all that first. And we'll tell you all that in a second. But I do want to also say that, like, talking about comparing this book to a product from a bigger company that has a hardback, $50 cover with the lush painting and stuff like that. It's another one of those deliberate choices where it's like, we are not in competition with that. If that is what you want, there it is. They've got a whole shelf of it. If you're looking for something else, we are the something else. And we are, so that's the soft cover. It's a little bit smaller. It's a little bit, it's got the soft cover. It's got the reduced, not necessarily reduced production, but like the presentation is not overly stated because we're not in competition with Wizards of the Coast. We are in competition with other indie publishers, like our friends that are now friends in the industry, right? Like Mage Hand Press and Nerdburger Games and Imagining Games and Ninth Level Games and Magpie Games and Wicked Clever Games and all of those people. They're all going to be on the indie shelf over here. And then there's going to be another huge shelf with all of Wizards of the Coast and Paizo stuff. And we're not in competition with those people. So don't file us over there. Don't compare us with them. We want our book to look different than that because that's not who we're in competition with. And so that is, I have to get that out about like the choices that we're making about the presentation of the product. And
he
then
mentioned the white cover, or the white tone. Like it's a dark game, but it is a bright cover,
Yeah.
which is it's very deliberate. Our signage, we have people who will come across a convention hall because they see our banner and they're like, "What is that?" And we're like, "Let's tell you." You mentioned that the art, the size, the page count, like all of these things were choices that we made. We had not made a horror game, and we said we want to make a horror game. We like history. No one ever talks about World War One. Let's make a World War One game. So like every step along the way with Never Going Home was a choice to make it exactly as it is.
go
ahead.
Well, go ahead, Matt.
No, I want to hear more, please.
And I want to bring it back to Charlie, because talking
Yes.
about like it's the calculation is slightly different, and I mean you finished the preview of the questions, and we've kind of skipped right to the middle of your list here at
That's
this
okay.
point. But Never Going Home and the book you're holding was our third project that we did, and it was really, I mean, is it serendipitous? I don't know, but like the origins of the book lie in the art that you're talking about, and that's another piece that is right up there with those pieces. Charlie had done a series of art that was just out of his brain, off the top of his head, that was like, what if I did World War One but like spooky, and to reduce what he was trying to do. But like we were aware of that project. We were aware of him as an artist because he'd come and talk to Brandon at a convention about like, hey, I'm a new artist. I want to work for role play games. Here's my portfolio. So like Brandon knew about him already, and we were watching him and what he was doing, and so he was putting out this series of art, and we reached out to him and be like Brandon was saying, like, this is creepy, this is horror, this has a great vibe. Nobody does World War One. There's a space in the market for us to take this art and then write a role-playing game around it, and this will be a success for everyone involved. And Charlie was open to that, and so I believe it is correct to say that all of the art in the core book, that is the art that already existed.
That's cool.
Almost all of the art in the core book. It's not.
I think there's maybe one piece. There's a couple pieces, and the cover. The cover was new, but all the interior art was work that art existed before the game. It literally inspired the game because we saw it and we were like, we want to work around this art to make a role playing game that
so we
does
were able
justice
to license that
to that art. So
I was going to say,
when you say that it's of the piece, it is.
Yeah, it was originally that, and the game grew out of that.
Exactly right.
Wow,
exactly
actually,
right.
So wow, that's amazing. It reminds me.
Charlie has an art book called World War Occult, and it was one of those things that he had done this as like an Inktober project where he did all the sketches and doodles that he wanted to do. And then he made an art book, and his dad wrote some poetry for it, and it was great. And I backed that when he originally did it. Like Matt said, we saw all of that stuff. We followed him as an artist and always would promote that work. And we said, we'd like to license this art from you, but also anything else that we do for this line, you would get the right of first refusal. You'd say like, oh, I'm too busy or whatever. Fine, we'll find somebody else.
He hasn't said no yet.
He has done every bit of art for our 10-book line except one piece, which was a schematic for a submarine.
Yeah.
So
wow, that's awesome. That's super interesting. Like I like the idea of, so many times, and that was one of my questions, and it's different for everybody, but I was wondering like if you go to artists or artists come to you or whatever, and this sounds like a really kind of like organic process where something inspired you. You guys wrote a story around it, like in your head. Somebody started with it, and then it just sort of grew out of there. So just to rewind a little bit here, what was it then originally that got you to sit down and form Wedding Games? Was it, am I right? It was 2015, and you started with Wild Skies? Was that your first
Mhm.
endeavor, like as a team or as the company together? What?
Our first endeavor as the company for ourselves,
Ah,
not our first
Yeah.
endeavor as a team of
right.
writers.
Yes.
So we have a couple publications from Palladium Books. Like my first publication, Brandon mentioned already, his first publication was in a Rifter, and my first publication is in Rifter 50, a little bit later than Brandon, but it's co-written with Brandon. We wrote some stuff together, and that's my first publication
Then
is in there.
let me ask you about that then, and I trust me, I'll get to this the formation of the company part. But like,
Yeah.
what is it like? So you're working for Kevin Ciambieta.
Mhm.
Like, does he just is it as simple as what you were saying before, Brandon? Like, you had an idea, you pitched it, he said, "Oh, write it," or did he kind of come to you and say, "Look, I need 5,000 words, or I need this number of words
Oh
for
no.
Rifter number, whatever," or what was that like for your first piece
So
together?
and I will preface this by saying, I don't necessarily speak for Kevin or anything like that. I
Mhm.
speak from my own personal experience. Uh, I love this man. He's a great guy. He's been in the industry for a long time. I know that I could call him right now and he would answer his phone. Like it is, um, and but he has been a mentor
Mm,
for a long time, and there are certain things that he has done and does as a company to that we don't necessarily do at Wet Ink Games because we know what we want to do in a direction we want to go. Like Matt said, we're not in competition with
mm.
a company that's been around for 40 years. It's not the ball field that we want to play in. But when I look at kind of how where he's come from, he started as an artist
Mm.
for oh geez.
Well, I
I
know
mean he
he's
did
working for TSR at
no,
like
yeah, he did TSR
early
work. It was
on.
I don't remember the name of the um I don't remember
Talking
the
about
name.
that comic that he did.
No, not it he did some stuff for as part of his TSR work.
Mm.
Anyway, so he was in the industry for a long time. So there are certain things that Matt and I have done that we've kind of learned from him. But one of the things that Kevin always taught me, and I did two internships with him when I was in graduate school, um, was one, like, pay your artists and pay him a fair rate. If don't try to get one over on them. And we've actually taken that to the next level. And Matt's our creative director. We'll talk about kind of how we deal with artists in a little bit. But secondly, that ideas are easy and execution is hard.
Mm.
So when I told you that, like at Origins in 2000, summer 2004, I told you I'd met Kevin and I said, "Hey, I have this idea for a Rifter article." Well, this was Sunday afternoon. I bet he'd heard, you know,
Right.
50 other pitches of people who are like, "Oh, hey man, I had this really great idea for this adventure or this book or da, da, da." And it's like, sure, like he may hear this all the time. And I mean, even when we go to conventions, we hear this kind of stuff all the time, and it's not a problem. But if someone says we're like, "That sounds great. Show me what you have," or let's see
Yeah.
something that comes
Yeah.
out of this. Um, and so ideas are easy, execution is hard is something
Mm.
that is kind of our mantra. Um, and when we were freelancing, when I was freelancing, we said we have this idea, let's go on and put it together. And I worked with another writer at the time. His name was Taylor White,
Mm-hmm.
and we got together and we wrote an article on how to write or run a political campaign in Heroes Unlimited. In 2004, it was an election year. It came out the month before the election, and we had a lot of fun with it. Um, but from a guidance standpoint, especially for the Rifter, for a quarterly magazine like that, it was never really a solicited thing. It was like, sure, submit an article, let's see where it goes.
Gosh,
Rifter
what is their
50 was
slush pile like? I can't even
a
imagine.
it's I mean, as someone who has had to go through that slush pile a few times and find some diamonds in the rough, it was good. I mean, I some of my friends from Palladium who have written books for them were people that during my internships I found an article and was like, this is really good. Like this, some of this other stuff is fine, but like this stands out. We need to call them. And Kevin was like, good, call them. So I did, and you know, said, okay, do something with this, and let's see where it goes. And then
It's
Thundercloud Galaxy gets written. You know,
it's funny that
and
you mentioned. Oh, go ahead.
well, long story short,
Hmm.
the just being able to sit there and write some stuff. You're sure in some of these companies, you may sit there and say, I need 15,000 words. This is going to be your per word rate. Your contract is in your inbox right now, and I need it in 30 days. If you need a 15-day extension or grace period, fine, but just let me know. But I'd really like to have it in 30 days. Great. Sometimes that's what you get. Sometimes someone may say, hey, I really need you to draw, 58 dogs. So go draw 58 dogs.
It
And
was at least 58.
correct. So, so I mean, it's hit or miss depending on the company, depending on the project, and depending on the relationship that you have with your creative. We try to be pretty consistent with the people that we work with. But from Kevin's standpoint, like he has all kinds of different people that he works with now, and they're putting out some really really cool stuff. They have a new business manager over there as well from who's hired from Pinnacle.
Pinnacle, yeah.
Yeah, and so they're doing some really cool stuff. They just had a successful Kickstarter for their Titan robotics book. Um, or book Titan robotics book. They just had different iterations of it, so you'll start seeing some more stuff out of them.
Yeah, it was just funny when you mentioned the part about he told you to call him up. It was really funny. Kevin was like one of my first interviews, and he's been really nice to me. Like he's come on my show twice, and he'll come on and he'll talk, and the show will go like 3 hours. Like he's
100%.
a machine with like amazing stories inside of him. But the first time I ever was contacted by him at all, I'm like coming home from like teaching, and the phone rings, and I'm like, Michigan, what? And,
Who do I know?
I'm like, I don't know anyone named Michigan. It's probably a spam call, and I don't know why I even picked it up. I don't know why. I pick it up, and it's like, hey, this is Kevin over at Palladium Books. Can I talk to Matt? And I'm like, Kevin, the only Kevin I know like at Palladium is Kevin Ciambieta at Palladium Books, asshole. Who are you? And
Right.
he's just me. And I was like, and like I had forgotten that like 4 months before I had sent him an email. And I just like I send out a million emails for interviews, and I don't hear back from some people, and I just totally just discarded it in my head, and I'm like, somebody's playing a prank on me, some lie, like one of my friends. But he just called me, and he'll just call me from he's called me a couple times, and I'm like, oh, it's great.
And
It's funny.
and you're right. Like not only will you get some stories, it's like, hey, here's what's going on in the industry right now, here's some of my thoughts or whatever, but like there's all kinds of excellent information that kind of comes out of the of the history. Judges Guild was what I was thinking of. Oh my gosh,
Yes,
his
that's
work
right.
Judges Guild, holy crap. But yeah, the life and
20
time
minutes ago.
of the industry, I know, right?
We ought to be on this schedule. We ought to finish this interview by May 27th, I think. We'll do
Yeah.
it.
So, yeah, hey, go back and watch your 2 interviews with Kevin Samita. He'll tell you all the stuff he needs to tell you.
Yes, it's just packed. It's so packed with like a lot of really useful publishing information, really like lots of gold nuggets, like really and delivered in a funny and entertaining way. And you at a certain point you're like, I don't know if I want to hear about role playing or if I just want to hear his stories about like, Michigan or whatever. Like it's so interesting. What so let me ask you this. That was a part about getting your first gig with the the company or together.
Yeah, we haven't actually gotten to that part
What about
yet.
Wild Skies? Oh, you haven't?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think I mentioned that we had done a couple projects together and that have been published by Palladium. So when we had an idea for what became Wild Skies, it was sort of like not a fit for Palladium. So then that's the question, is like, okay, we've got this idea, we're excited about it, we think we're going to put in some work on it just like we've done together for the previous projects, but what is the ultimate, what's going to be the result of it? You know, do we shop it to someone else? Do we start our own company? Like, do we try to twist Kevin's arm and tell him he should publish it anyway, even if he doesn't want to? Like that, I mean, that's a non-starter basically, because he does whatever he wants. So, you know, I mean, it led eventually to us making a play in the industry as ourselves, like with you know, not no experience in the industry, but less than we might have had, you know, to start our own company. We're just like, well, I mean, let's try it and see. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Is our Kickstarter fails, and then we write this anyway, and it, you know, whatever. I mean, it's like a low stakes kind of situation. But fortunately, it was successful, and you know, we spent. Now, having done that as our first project, we've never taken quite so long to make a book ever again, which is good. And we've narrowed in on what we like to do as a company a little bit better, which is good. Like everything is moving forward from that first project, or that first publication as Wet Ink Games.
What was it about Wild Skies? So for the viewers watching at home, I had looked it up and I was checking it out, and it's a really interesting mix of stuff in there, and I'd love to hear you both explain to the audience what is Wild Skies Europa Tempest.
Take Disney's Tailspin and Sky Captain of the World of Tomorrow and smash them together. That's Wild Skies. That's the elevator pitch, but it's anthropomorphic diesel punk sky pirates over Europe. That's Europa Tempest. We had talked about it at one point. We were like, hey, we kind of want to, going back to, hey, we never got to play TMNT. Like, hey, we want to go play a game of, you know, these weird kind of you know, anthropomorphic animals, but let's make our own setting. And so we did, and that's what kind of came out of it. And we made our own setting, made our own rule system. And then, as Matt said, when we launched our Kickstarter and we went through that, like because of the work that we had done in the industry through freelancing, knew a number of artists. Brian Manning did all the schematics and weapons in there. Chuck Walton, who did the cover and a couple pieces in the interior. Amy Ashbaugh had done some stuff for us. Mike Muma had done some stuff for us.
And Mike Muma was in our game at the time. So like,
oh yeah, he was in our game, and he was like, "So I'm going to do art for your book." So
and
he's like, "You can't tell me no."
You have no choice,
right?
And like the characters that are on the cover of Wild Skies are Brandon and my characters from a campaign that created the setting. We were like, we're gonna cook up this setting. We're gonna make our batch of you know, freelancers, right? They're mercenaries, right? So then, you know, Brandon played the big pig man, and I played the I don't know, is he debonair? He wasn't exactly debonair, but he was like a French pilot, sort of a medic, with a disgruntled medic, as many medics are. But so those covers, so to go from like, we're going to make up this new setting, and then ultimately it's going to be turned into a new game, and then the cover has our characters from the campaign that we played first in the setting on the cover. It's fun. I don't know. I think it's fun. It's great. It's very much of us, you know. Because it's that way.
I think it's a great, like, cool setting, and it's actually something, I don't want to say too much, but it's something I've been thinking a lot about, like, recently, like the anthropomorphic
like, I have it right
animal.
here.
Oh, there you go. What? So were you thinking, when you kind of came up with it, did you have the idea first, or were you thinking, was this at this time, had the license on TMNT expired for Palladium? Like, were you thinking this was a replacement, or
Um,
was it just
No.
coincidentally?
Again, we are not in competition with bigger companies.
You heard it here,
and
Certainly
I,
not
folks.
then. Certainly not
It's
then.
Orr and Aten's Wild Skies here, folks, coming to you. First issue is out of print. They're going to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th prints soon. It's only in black and white.
so from that time, I can't remember. I think I don't remember the TMNT license has been such an oddball for a while. So I think it's still with Nickelodeon, and so some elements
Yeah,
of it
you're
have been
probably right.
licensed out to IDW for board games, and I don't know if that's reverted since IDW's game section is kind of defunct. But when it comes to RPG, I don't know if that is even out there, or what
Right, where
company
it
is
is now.
holding on to a license for that,
Yeah.
or if Nickelodeon is just priced you know most companies out. I
What
don't know.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that it definitely was after Palladium was no longer publishing TMNT that
Oh
we
yeah,
had the idea for doing this new setting
yeah.
for the successor game, which is called After the Bomb.
Right. That's
And
right.
so, I mean, the rule set that we first developed the setting in was the rule set of After the Bomb.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
And then we developed the setting and the alternate,
Mhm.
and then we were like, okay, let's turn this into our own game after that. And then we started working on the mechanics part of it. So
What was it like then? So you decide, okay, we want to do this ourselves. Um,
hmm
and you decided to go with Kickstarter.
hmm
And for me, I look at Kickstarter every day, and I'm frightened to death by the mathematical computations inherent in like the stretch goals and like the possibilities of screwing something up, of like dropping the ball. Like, what was it like? Were you like, okay, we're gonna do Kickstarter, or were you thinking, should we do Kickstarter? Should we do drive through? Should we do something else? Um, or were you always kind of set on Kickstarter?
So we are members of the Indie Game Developers Network, and prior to Wild Skies, we weren't. However, because we had done some freelance work with, not only for uh, for Palladium, but we'd done some freelance work for Third Eye Games
Right.
separately. Matt and I worked on different projects at different times for Third Eye Games run by Aloy Lasanta, and we've done stuff for Nerdburger Games and just some other people who are also members of the Indie Game Developers Network. We had a whole lot of resources in order
Mm.
to ask questions,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, hey, how do we do this by ourselves? Like, we want to do this. We know we want to do this. Where do we go? What do we do? So, like, Drive Through RPG was definitely always in the cards. This is how we're going to, at least this is where we're going to kind of put it out there in the universe at some point. But it was, and that's actually with Wild Skies, our first print run, first couple print runs, I think, were all through Lightning Source or Drive Through RPG. So they're all like print on demand
Mm.
quality. And so that's one of those things that uh we learned from. But when it came to Kickstarter, it was like, well, we know the quality that we want, and
Yeah.
this is another one of the tenets of Wet Ink Games. Like, we don't want to sacrifice quality we don't want to make like a lackluster product or not the product that we want. So we kind of want to make sure from the get-go people know what they're getting. So we knew we wanted to be we have good artists, good art in the game. We knew we wanted it to we knew Wild Skies was going to be a black and white book, because at that point the black and white line art was not only more affordable for us, but when it came right down to it, like we've talked about Palladium for a while, like you can actually see where we cut our teeth.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's two column layout.
Mhm.
It's line art. Like we see some of that inherent in our books, and it's our genetic makeup for our company. And
Absolutely.
so yeah, and uh as we move forward and as we kind of grew out of that, you are exactly right. How do you navigate the Kickstarter world of your stretch goals and everything? Like, um how do you balance that, like, funded on day one versus like, all right, it's going to take you a while to fund, but you're going to have the money to make your game. We also make the deliberate choice, like what we ask for on Kickstarter, when we ask for in crowdfunding, that is to make the game. We don't want, and it's to make the game that we want, that we have decided upon. It is not, okay, well, we'll ask for $5,000. And if we get to $6,000, we'll double the art. When we get to $7,000, we'll do this other stuff. We want to make the
Your
end
game.
goal,
Yeah.
the end game, you know.
And I mean, on one level, it sounds selfish, I suppose, to try to go it out that way. Is like this is what we want.
It sounds
right?
like an
This
artist that wants to
we've
do.
Envisioned.
No, that's. I mean, so no, it doesn't sound selfish. Go ahead.
Well, and obviously because now that we've been doing this a little while, like people ask us all the time, like, how do you get started? What do you do? And that is the advice that I give is like, don't set up a book. Don't set up yourself up to fail by asking for an amount of money that's smaller than what you really need. Like if you ask, if you make up a number, right? If you ask for $2,500 and you really need 7,000, so you're hoping to like get to 300%, like that's a bad way to design the process. Don't do it that way. Go ahead and ask for $7,000 because that's what you need to make the book, and then you got to work to get there. You got to build your fan base up to the point that you can get that many. You got to know if you need $7,000, then that's however many hundreds of people at $30 each. Like, you have to do all the math stuff. And if it's not reasonable, you don't do it. But if it seems like, you could get there with, a little bit of ad and, talk to these people and go on a podcast or a live stream to like promote your stuff, you could get there and then do it because you'll be happier and the product will be better if it looks like what you were always going to make it look like from the beginning, and you've already priced that all out and you have that information, how much to ask for. I do not advise people to like underbid or undersell themselves on Kickstarter, because it often ends up you being trapped, right? With like not having the funds you need to make the book even half as good as you thought it was going to be,
or not make the product at all, and then you end up becoming one of those Kickstarters that doesn't ever deliver.
I think for all of those reasons, those are all super excellent reasons for going for what you think the game should be. And I think it doesn't sound selfish. I think it sounds like you have more of an artistic vision for it than say someone else that's and again, like I can see both sides. I'm a teacher, so I can see people approaching it from different ways and saying, look,
sure,
I'll this first one, if I can just get the wheels spinning and it's only got half the artwork I want and it's got a little bit more text and there's some more fluff in there, and then maybe with the next version I'll iterate and make it better. I can understand both, but what I also see, like if you're saying I want it to be this way, it's sort of like for the artwork for the creation that you're making to really flourish, you set these standards for it and you say, this is really my vision and this is how we see it, and I don't think it sounds selfish at all. And speaking of this is it's obviously been a very successful model for you, because I mean, you've done about 165,000 of them. Like I look back, and what I was really excited by, and I thought was great, there's like 10 or 12 of them that you've done since 2015.
It's about that way.
about.
It's somewhere around in
Um,
there. Yeah.
and what I was really struck
11.
by was
12.
12. Okay, so what I was really interested in was the idea that like, um, there's such a variety of stuff
Mm,
that you've really made, and it seems like that's and your goals are not like astronomical goals, but
Right.
like you're saying, they're I can tell that they're just enough to get the game that you want to make, or the game that you envision, or that the creators envision made done. So is there any, like, over the course of the last few years, like, was there anything that particularly stood out? You worked with many other creators, and
Mhm.
yeah.
did they come to you? Did you go to them, or did someone come to you and say, "Hey, I got
I
this
mean,
great idea for a game"?
we were talking about it with Charlie before, where it's like he had art that we wanted to use, so we went to him. And there's other times when people have come to us with ideas, and we say the same thing that Kevin told Brandon. Right? It's like, that sounds great, you write it, and then they go off and write it, and they deliver a manuscript. And so it's worked both ways, where you know, with Banana Chan and Sun Foon Lim, like they had a game already, and they were shopping it around to publishers. So like, it's not just about them having an idea. They had the game ready. They just needed to find a publishing
Mm-hmm.
partner. And so we have both solicited manuscripts and pursued artists to license art, and then found people to write the game, and also had people come to us with ideas. And we've kind of done enough projects that we've kind of done it all the different ways at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I
Like,
mean, they're all different, they're all challenging, they're all stimulating. It's been great.
the uh as Matt said, I mean, he hit the nail on the head with, with licensing the art from Charlie. But like, one story that I absolutely love is Once Never Going Home came out, and it was kind of our first. It was what kind of spawned the what we now call the +1 system.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it we had a friend who down here in Louisville, who now lives in New York. But he came up and was like, "Hey, I really like your system. I have a game that I want to write. It's about the Roman Empire.
Oh,
It's about the
yeah,
fall of Rome.
yeah.
I really want to do it." And we're like, "Yeah, that's cool." He's like, "Here's some art that I've just been doodling around," and he like showed this beautiful aqueduct scene, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like, how do I can't tell you no. Like, this is
Mm.
gorgeous. Like, the art is amazing." He's like, "Yeah, by the way, I'll write it. I'll do all the art for it." And we're like, "Oh, okay." And so like so he definitely approached us. We came to terms, and got all
Mm.
the contract language written, um and that was one of
That's
those games that just like magically happened.
Mm.
And
that's Stephen Wu, by the way. He's
yeah,
uh he's he's stupidly talented.
Mm.
yeah, he he did a lot of work for Jiangshi Blood in the Banquet Hall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Matt, that was one of those ones that came, that, as Matt said, was shopped around. Same thing with Julian Kim and Doug Lewandowski's Home, which is our card-based RPG, which is in layout right now. That one was one where they said, "Hey, we have this idea. We would like to partner with a company. Would you like to play test it and see if it fits your vibe?"
Mm.
And it's an absolute wonderful design, and we love it. But then, there's other games that we went after, like Matt. uh, you know Matt, like, inadvertently found Michael Brennan of
Oh
Psychic
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Kids.
I mean that. Yeah, I mean that's, yeah. Psychic Kids. I mean, we've basically mentioned all the games now. So like,
Yeah.
do any of them stand out? Like, yes, all of them stand out. So none of them stand
Yeah.
out. But it is. I mean, they all stand out in their own ways, I
Yeah.
guess. Since Brandon put it out here, I was a prejudge, a reader for the 200-word RPG challenge, which is this thing that has happened on the internet. If it hasn't happened in a few years, but it happened like 3 or 4 years in a row. And so I think it was a finalist. I don't think it was a winner that year, but it's a little game called Psychic Children on the Run from Danger. and it's only 200 words long, and basically those 200 words describe like when you're a psychic kid, and when you want to use your power, you draw a card from the top of the deck, and how close you match, if the card matches your guess, or rather, if you've correctly used your psychic power, then you activate your power and you get to take the narrative and describe how your psychic power helps you escape from the agents, right? And so, I mean, we played this game because I'm like, hey, I've read this game in the 200 RPG challenge. We should play it. It sounds fun. We played it. It was fun. And Brandon's like, we need to this one where we sought it out. We were like, Michael, can you write like 14,800 more words of this game? And he's like, I absolutely can. And so he did. And then and talking about standing out, and like it's kind of the perfect thing because it starts with this, as we've moved from game designers making other people's systems into working in other people's systems into publishers who are publishing for our own company, there's so much less we generating the content, right? All the inspiration comes from somewhere else for us basically at this point. So this is one at 200 RPG. We're aware of it. Brandon reached out. Michael wrote a great manuscript. And then I had this really clear vision about what I wanted the art to look like. So I had this artist. I was on the hunt. That's the project got slowed down because we were on the hunt for the perfect artist. And it's like, I need to find an artist who can do exactly what I want. And then we did.
We hit the jackpot last year.
Talked to a couple, and last year at Origins, we found an artist, and we talked to her, Sarah M.W. Miller. And it was like, I think you can do this exact thing that I want, where it's like, I want all the portraits of the psychic kids to be like 1/3 science diagram, kind of showing their powers in action. I want it to be 1/3 like an awkward middle schooler school portrait. And I want it to be 1/3 a Byzantine icon. And like with the gold and the halos and all that kind of stuff. And like, you put those together somehow because you're an artist, but that's what I want. And Sarah delivered exactly what I asked for. It's incredible art. I mean, it's so gratifying to have gone through this whole process with this game, where it's like some guy had an idea and he put it out in a very small form, and then we're like, okay, but write it better and bigger, not better but bigger, write it bigger. And so he did it bigger, and it was good. And then we added a little bit of +1 here and there to it, and then we got the artist who was able to deliver exactly the vision, the particular vision that I had. She was able to deliver on it, right? So then we hand that all over to our layout artist, who's Matthias Bonici, who's done a bunch of work for us over the years, and we're monopolizing all of his time this year. You can't have him. We still need him.
We highly recommend him, but
we highly recommend him. And
not
when
for
we're
the
done,
next
he could
12 to 18 months.
He could put you on the end of his queue, but we've got him for now. But he did all of this work for all the layout. The art looks great in context. There's this and this sort of takes us back to Never Going Home a little bit, right? Because it's like the kind of the concept, again, talking with him about layout, and like we want this to, it has the feel of like the psychic kids have been in the facility and they've escaped, and they've taken like an employee manual with them that tells them about what the psychic powers are, and now you as the player are reading the manual that has all the facility data in it about the psychic powers. But then the kids have like stuck in notes in the book, and they've put in like photographs of things on their adventures, and the edges of the pages are tattered because they've been traveling cross country and they're only like middle schoolers, and that just doesn't keep your books very clean. And so it's this distressed object that's been lived in and worked over, but that's all just like part of Matt's making it look that way. It's not really that object,
right,
but it gives that impression of that kind of object from the story world that now you as the player are holding, and you're like, it's the invitation to be sucked into the world of the game by like that, by presenting the information in that way. So I think for me, that's one of the ones that has stood out the most, because we were so involved in such different ways in every part of the process of like, we invited the artist in, and we invited the art in, the writer in, and we put them together, and Matthias did it all, and that was a very collaborative process of the layout part of it. So it's I want to continue to work that way with other projects in the future. because it was a very exciting and stimulating book to put together. And I've got the printer's proof.
Oh,
It's not in this
really?
room. It's downstairs.
Top
So it's almost
secret.
ready. So
Right.
yeah,
It
so it's almost ready to go to print, and then it'll be out in the world. And the PDF has been out there a while, but the physical book is sort of the ideal way to experience it.
Experience, right? Well, and Never Going Home kind of started that way too. We said Never Going Home, we want it to feel like a soldier's journal. And actually, with one of our Kickstarters, we had a soldier's journal
right
edition of it. And
when
so
it's and the content too. It's not just about the layout, like the content with Sarah
Alfred's letters.
Sarah, the fictional part of it that Sarah wrote.
Yep.
Different Sarah than the artist Sarah I was talking about, Sarah or Aten, who is Brandon's wife and my sister. And so it's she's like, I know about World War One. You should let me write some stuff. And we're like, yes, please write some stuff. And so she wrote all those letters that are in there, and she's been a consistent fictional voice of throughout the Never Going Home project. Adding a fictional element.
The interesting thing that I'm thinking of now as I listen to the two of you speak about it, and I think about the games that I've seen you publish under your umbrella, and I don't know, maybe you can say more about this, or maybe this is just all that's to be said, but from talking to you, I get this sort of feeling like you're also very interested in the collaborative part, where you're in this discovery and sparks of inspiration, and not necessarily, I mean, obviously you both have visions, or a collective vision, or a singular vision for what you want the company to be, what you want certain games to be. But I feel like you're also about like talking and allowing sparks to fly, and the interaction with others. I mean, is that a fair thing to say? Because I feel like there are some other people who maybe just want to do their own thing, or they just want to, like, they start a publisher because it's like, look, Matt and we just want to like start our company, and we don't want to be affected by anyone else, and they just sort of go their own way. But I feel like you're both actually very much into the, not necessarily the social aspects of it, but the collaborative aspects, where like other people's ideas are floating to the surface, and rising tide raises all boats.
And I think that's a very good observation. One of the things that we've done is, I mean, we had some information early on, or some input that people gave us early on that was actually pretty good. Like, do you want this to be a passion project, or do you want this to be a business? And we're like, well, we kind of want to do both. Like, we want to make games that we feel have been neglected in the space. We're not sitting there making a giant, huge fantasy heartbreaker, to go up and rival D&D. That's not what we want to do. We want to go and we want to make the kinds of games that we want. We've specifically said that we want to be art forward. We want to really focus on quality art, and not only just focus on quality art, but we also want to like pay those artists what they deserve. And so we have a stable of artists that we're constantly adding to, but they like to work with us. We love to take an artist and a writer and say, like, this artist will nail this vision. And so for this game or this line, this is going to be the primary artist, if not the only artist. So Heckin' Good Doggos was a game that we put out, and Mike Muma is the sole artist of that game line. We talked about Charlie and Never Going Home. Sarah M.W. Miller, like, she did all of those character portraits. But we got to a certain point where we said, Sarah, can you do 2 more? And she's like, I don't have the capacity right now because I'm doing other stuff. We found an artist that could do something very similar, and was also collaborative with Sarah during that entire process, which we thought was great. the collaboration that you're talking about is exactly one of the things that we love to do. Now, do we give artists artists and writers completely free reign? No, there are guardrails. There are certain things where we say, this is the vision for the product. And if you go over here, it's a bridge too far. And we'll rein back in. Matt's really excellent at that. And we get to a certain point with some of our stuff. If someone pitches an idea and they say, hey, I want to write a mission for Never Going Home based on X, Y, or Z. It's like, that's not what this game is about. It's like, okay, then, give us some other ideas and we'll go down that path.
I've almost never had to tell anyone no.
Almost never.
That
almost is doing a lot of work.
I really like what you said, Matt. I hadn't really said it in such a thought of it in such a succinct way. And I think maybe that's been sort of like the real pleasure of the successes that we've had, is that our first project was written by Brandon and I, and like we swapped manuscript sections and edited each other's work. And that's like, it's really only us in that book. And for every other project since then has had other contributions by other people. And so I think it's been, I shouldn't have been surprised, right? But like, now that we go to conventions so much more often, like we were just starting to go to conventions in 2019, and then like in 2020 we didn't go to any conventions. So like really we've only been going to conventions like in 2021 and 2022, and we haven't been to any yet in 2023. So it's like really only 2 years of conventions, and that's when you like meet all of those people in person that you've like that you've seen, or you've seen their names on other bylines in books, or you've interacted with them. And it's like there's this huge number of people that I want to work with because I've met them, and like they're friendly people, and they're so creative. And it's humbling in a way to run up against those people that like I've had like some success putting together books, but that's not the same as like, you are a singular talent of game design, and please let me showcase your work. It's a different, obviously I'm also interested in showcasing the work because then people will buy the books that have my company's name on them. But like, but genuinely it is two-way street in that way, where it's like, there's so many people that are so talented, and yes, I am super excited to work with them and showcase their work and get them more recognition to the extent that I have any ability to project that, right? The market, the vagaries of what people are interested in this year I'm not in charge of all of that, but like
man, our job would be so much easier if you were.
Yeah like I've decided only rip-offs of Alien this year. That's it. All games will be rip-offs of Alien this year.
Just riding that wave.
Right. So like, yeah, it is been, I say humbling, and I say it is so much fun to like create a product together. And I didn't necessarily know I was looking for that, I guess, but then it's been a process of discovery of like, man, there's just so many talented people out there, and I've gotten to work with so many of them already, and there's so many more that I haven't, that I want to, or that I'm always looking for like another and it's not that I'm, like Brandon said, we've got a huge stable of people that we continue to come back to, both writers and artists and layout people and stuff like that we want to work with again. But there's always new people coming in, and people are coming up, and you're like, I want to be there to discover them, you know, or to give them their first, like, hey, I'm new and I've got a thing. Do you have any work? And I'm like, yeah, we've got work for new designers too, because somebody was the person who gave me my first credit. So like, I want to return that. I'm in the place now where I'm somebody's first publication, or I'm the publisher of someone's first work. So it's like
our current stretch goal list.
Cycle keeps going around.
Our current stretch goal list are people who've never worked on Never Going Home. We've worked with them on other stuff, some of them, but it's all new people to Never Going Home, and who have expressed interest.
That's cool.
In the past, of being like, hey, I'd really like to write something for this game, and So, when Matt and I were working and talking about getting this project together, sure, like the books for this current campaign have been, some of the people who've been around the property for a while, but our stretch goals were people who were like, yes, I really want to do this,
Who are we
and
on
some
right now?
like
I don't even know.
extremely talented people who've been in different just different uh genre, or even in the horror genre, but different games. Like I know like Bridget Jeffries has done so much stuff for Chaosium,
Hmm.
and for like a lot of the Cthulhu horror mythos.
Yeah.
Graham, he's been around for a while doing all kinds of stuff. Graham Gentz, the Daniel Kwan, he worked with us on
Mm-hmm.
for Jiangshi Blood in the Banquet Hall, but he was the lead designer for Ross Rifles.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
uh
Yeah. Yeah.
and so we were like, hey, do you want to do a mission for Never Going Home? He's like,
Oh.
he's like, I don't really want to do a mission, but can I do some really cool artifacts and stuff? I'm like,
Yeah.
you can do whatever you want.
I just
Like,
made. Yeah.
you're
I just made that connection. That's right. I have Ross Rifles, and Daniel's been on the program, and
Yeah.
suddenly I was like, oh wait, this kind of like it dovetails here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that totally
Right.
sounds like something that would be
Well,
up
and that's
his
he's
alley.
one of those people that I'm like we made a stupid game about like what if we added zombies to World War One, and he's like, I went to the National Museum of Canada and examined the actual artifacts because I'm that's his bag. He's
Right.
like an archaeologist,
Right.
and a
He's like,
museum
I'm an
person,
archaeologist.
and so like I'm like, yeah, I mean, already like Never Going Home is nothing compared to like the quality of work that we're up against in quotes, but like, so for him to say like, sure, I'll come on, and I feel like he's like, oh yeah, I'll slum in your little stupid fantasy
Right.
game,
Yeah,
like,
I'll help you
you
out a
know,
little bit. Sure, why
but
not?
eh, but but it's great that, but I mean, I guess Never Going Home is doing things that Ross Rifles isn't, because Ross
Yeah.
Rifles is so grounded,
Yeah.
and it is so almost serious in its like
Oh yeah.
portrayal of like the Canadians, and especially because that's Daniel's bag, like the
Mhm.
Canadian Chinese people who were part of that army, like the immigrant experience that they were the setting. So to get somebody who has done another game that is
Right.
more about the real history,
Brings a
it
new
is,
perspective and
yeah, it does.
yeah.
And it's something that, not that he needs us to do him a favor or anything like that, but it's like, let's continue to collaborate, right?
Yeah.
Because like you've done a thing in World War One that's different from what we've done, and we want your voice as part of our game, and so he's going to do that, and so it's great.
Yep.
Well,
So
I know that we're starting to come up on the end of the our timeout here. And so I
yeah,
just
we need to go.
what's that?
I would just make it time out. We've gone too far.
You've gone too
No,
far.
that's it. Personal foul.
That's right.
No,
Red card. You're out of here.
5 yards, first down. So what I wanted to kind of like close us out with, and I wanted to know a little bit about the future here, and what is it? What are you doing with the end or the beginning and the end? How are you sort of exploring that never going home world? What are you adding? What can we expect for those of us that are part of the Kickstarter? Which is going on now, by the way. Check out the link below.
It's very simple. We're Mitch is currently unlocked again, Brandon. I don't know if that's the one you were saying that we were fluctuating back and forth on.
Yes. I've been watching it.
Okay, so simply, as brief as I can, there's 3 books that we're funding here, and so one is more magic. It'll be sort of the most. We didn't exactly make it as extreme as possible, but there's definitely some stuff in here which takes the setting, pushes it maybe to the limits of what the envelope that is the war could handle. As far as like doing different things with the magic capabilities of the setting, and we're going to get into some weird healing stuff. There's a mission that involves like going to the edge of space, real pulpy sci-fi type.
Wow.
It's like it's just on the edge. Like any more like that's one where it was like, pull it back a little bit, Mike. It's getting too,
That's interesting. Okay. I hadn't read that
so
part. Okay, I missed that part, but still.
I don't know if that's exclusive. I don't
That's
know if that was
cool.
in the description, but it's like and there's an interview with Mike Coker on our channel that you can go watch, and he talks about the pulp influences and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not quite like technically right for the period, so it brings a little flavor that it hasn't had before. So that's the idea of that book, that it's sort of like the most extreme, some of the more extreme visions of Never Going Home, and what is it, what can be tangential to the sort of the war front as explored by Never Going Home. And then the other two books are the other two campaign dossiers, because our last time out in 2019, we did campaign dossiers for 2015, 2016, and 2017. So the beginning and the end is the 1914 and 1918. Right. So those are the two, that's the beginning of the year, the beginning year of the war, and the end year of the war are those 2 years. So then after this Kickstarter, we'll have a campaign dossier for each of the 5 years that the conflict lasted. In the 1914 book, this time we're doing, because each of the dossiers focuses, it gives you 6 missions which are connected thematically and story-wise, rather than standalone missions. And it puts you in a particular theater of the war and sets you up with the assumptions that you're going to be playing characters of a certain nationality. So in the 1914 book, you are Serbians. You're part of the irregular army that is part of the machinations that led to the assassination. You're like a spy going on missions, importing, smuggling weapons into the Austro-Hungarian Empire for the coming planned conflict to liberate Bosnia and Herzegovina from Austro-Hungarian control and return them, as the Serbians feel, to Serbia. That's the tensions that lead up to in the spring and summer of 1914 to a little thing that happened in Sarajevo. You may have heard of it or something like that.
Maybe.
And then the 1918 book. Oh, if you've never heard of it, all the better. You'll be surprised.
Yeah, exactly. No spoilers.
And the 1918 book, because we finally have gotten around to including specifically the Americans and the American Expeditionary Force arriving en masse in spring of 1918, and then the 6 or so months that go from there up until the end of the war in November. So it's sort of a lot of forward momentum, a lot of messes made, a lot of people get kind of pushed out of the way as the Americans come in and they're trying to drive toward this date. I mean, obviously, they're not trying to go to the date. I mean, the date is looming in the distance, but they're trying to make advances. They're trying to shake stuff up in the situation in Europe to get there. So you being part of that force, where how do the Americans do stuff a little bit different than the other nations, and what kind of new insights or resources or methods do they use in the execution of the war is what the 1918 book will explore. So,
and you actually held up, Mike or Matt, you held up your copy of the core book, Never Going Home, as well as one of our adventure books, that one called Once More Under the Breach. And Once More Under the Breach is full of adventures from people who were unlocked during the very first campaign as stretch goals.
I think there's 21 adventures in there.
That was, I mean, I just I didn't even look, like when I looked at the core book, I just had to get this one with a sight unseen, and it was, I did not regret it.
And so
The Fault in Our Scars by August Hahn there on the screen.
He's so great.
August is, I mean, the 1914 book in particular has all veterans of the Never Going Home setting. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I was working on it today, the manuscript, polishing it up, adding a little bit here and there.
In this book, this book, again, these were all stretch goals that were unlocked, and we said, okay, well, we'll release these digitally, and we'll eventually combine them into a book. And so that's what became of those 21 adventures. And these are people all over the industry, people that we've worked with, people that we know, from just sitting next to them at a convention, or people who are in the Indie Game Developers Network. But like Eric Bloat from Bloat Games. We have um, uh, we just saw August Hahn. August has been all over the place. Craig from Nerdburger Games is there. It's just
Mm.
packed full
Mm.
of excellent talent. And
Oh,
so all of
I think
those were
that's where Liz Chuck
standalone
Radical's
missions.
adventure is too.
That's right. And all of those were standalone missions, and
Mm-hmm.
same thing with the core book.
Mm-hmm.
The Book of Whispers also has some additional standalone missions, and the Tome of
They all do.
Corrupted Beasts has standalone missions. These were very deliberate choices. We wanted every book that you could get from us to have something for everyone, not just a narrator, not just a player. We wanted everyone to have something in every book. And so after our first convention for Never Going Home back in 2019, we had some multiple questions. People said, "Are you ever going to do a full campaign?"
Mm.
And that's what led to the last Kickstarter campaign that Matt had just alluded
Yeah.
to, where we had those connected missions telling an overarching story. So more of that.
The other part of your question that you asked is what's next, and
was...
I don't think it's not a secret, right, Brandon? I mean, this is sort of like, we feel like this will sort of complete the line in a lot of respects. Like, after this Kickstarter, there'll be 10 books, and every year the war will be covered. There'll be 5 additional books, 4 other source books, and it's one of those things where it's like, if you really like World War One, there's always something else for you to find, and we could go more granular, but it's sort of like a simple game. Even though it's one of our more complex implementations of +1, it is still a relatively simple system. We don't want to get into tactical combat. We don't necessarily want to focus on vehicle stuff. Focusing really narrowly on, like, every day of the battle of like the 11 different battles in the Alps that the Italians fought with the it's I can't remember the name of the valley that they fought over, but there's like 12 battles over 3 years that they just fought over this valley back and forth. We don't want to do a 12 mission. You could get that granular, right? And the war has so many stories that you could support it with,
Right.
So we think this will close out basically the sort of like main books for the series, but there's so much. We're doing the stretch goals now, and there's so many other little pieces to explore. We've talked to people about, like, other things. We can always put out more adventures, right? And so they would not necessarily be a dossier book that's got 6 adventures, that's got a connected story, but like, as long as people want to write them and people want to buy them, there's no reason we can't continue to put out adventures periodically. So I think the line will continue to live on, and I think the points that we will continue to do they'll continue to be very small little vignettes, basically.
Right.
I know one piece that I think was pretty fascinating is that the French drafted a bunch of people from Vietnam and sent them to fight the Ottomans. So there's photographs of this. It's not like it's a lost thing, but there's like, what's that story of the Vietnamese participation under French uniform fighting the Ottomans in what is now Greece, or wherever they were in that, like, part of the world. Like, that's a less told story. There were naval battles between Germans and British people out in the colony areas of Southeast Asia. There's like these naval campaigns. There's we've got a buddy that's always like, he's always like, Pershing went to Mexico before he before he was sent to Europe. He was chasing Ponce Villa in Mexico like the year before he went to Europe. I want to do that story. And I'm like, well, great, someday you'll do that story. So there's lots of little places where things were happening that can be explored in like one mission at a time. And I think there's no reason to stop and to do those things.
And it may be something that's released all, we release these electronically. We, who knows, we may, compile some of these, or ones that are thematically connected in some way, maybe not as much as a campaign dossier, but like, hey, all of these deal with, Southeast Asia, or all of these deal with, what's going on in, in this one place, whether they're connected geographically, thematically, whatever that looks like.
Right.
Um, so that might be something that's in the pipe. But again, we need to get through what we're working on now, and making sure that that's delivered and in the hands of the people that are helping us fund and make these awesome products.
Yeah, I think that's a great sort of like work ethic there. Like, I mean, you have your goal and you set your goal, and then you work on that and you focus, and then you think about the future when you get to the future. And that was actually something I was talking about with Keith Baker in the last interview, and he kind of like sets himself up so that he's working and focused on his one idea, and he sort of trusts that he's got this one idea and he wants to complete this one idea first. And I like this idea of having this set of books where you've set up a very loose network and sometimes tight network of interconnected kind of like things, and now that leaves a lot of space for the players and to go in there and make of it what they will, and inspires them to tell their own stories. And they can certainly go to the history books if they want to research and, as you say, get granular.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on time out, our time, but I definitely wanted to thank you both very much for coming on the program. It's particularly fun when I get to talk to people that are doing such interesting and different stuff, new and creative stuff. I highly recommend if you're watching this, if you haven't checked it out, I put links to Wet Ink Games, their homepage, their Twitter account, the current Kickstarter, the beginning and the end that's going on right now. Randomly closing your eyes, clicking on any of those things is going to bring up something super cool. I recommend going for the Kickstarter first, but to help them out. But they're already doing. I thought last time I checked, you were at like 155, 100 and something.
161%.
Okay, so they're doing well. Please do check it out.
That's very happy, and thank you. You said you were a backer, so thank you for being a backer.
No, absolutely. Like, this was something I grabbed these, like, when I saw them, it's like it's something special, and you get that feeling out of it for sure. So for those of you watching at home, thank you very much again for your viewership. If you like my program, if you like seeing awesome people come on and hearing them talk about the cool stuff that they're doing, hearing their insights and experiences, and learning about why they do what they do and how to do it really well, please do think about subscribing. Please do think about sharing. That also helps me out a lot, just sending something to someone else and tell them to check it out. But yes, thank you so much for watching. I will be back, I think, next week. I haven't checked my calendar. I've been really bad about that because I'm so focused. Like, I'm actually, so I'm the viewers know this, I'm an English teacher, and I'm doing like 3 things. Like, I've got parent-teacher conferences. I've got, I'm directing The Three Musketeers. I'm also writing it in its French and English. And
all right.
And I'm currently running a channel. I'm doing an interview right now. I've got interviews, so I'm like super busy. I've got something coming up next week on the channel. I forget what it is. I'm talking to somebody.
But it's gonna be great.
It's gonna be good. It's gonna be.
It might be
an English performance of Three Musketeers. That's
awesome. Yeah, for all I know, we might stream it. Yeah, who knows?
I don't know. You were probably about to say goodbye, but I think we've managed to mention every single book that we've worked on, except for our Into series, which is produced with partnership with Feral Indie Studios. And so the first one, Into the Weird and Wild, came out a while ago. Into the Sessin Citadel came out right at the end of last year, so it'll be at cons this year. Into the Sessin Citadel,
That's right,
by Alex Coggin and Charles Ferguson Avery. It's a system agnostic source book for making a urban space horrible, full of ways to explore buildings like they're dungeons, explore the sewers like it's dungeons, navigate webs of intrigue between different factions of the city. If you want to set that stuff up, it's a huge source book for any sort of system you want to throw that kind of stuff at.
It's
so
gorgeous.
I think now it is also gorgeous. I think we've managed to mention at least in
That's
passing
good.
everything
we did it
that
all.
we've published.
That's great. And like I said, you can just put all these things on your wall, close your eyes, throw a dart, and any one of them is going to be like really interesting or cool. Please, you have my guarantee on that. So please do give it a try.
Yeah.
Just wait till later this year.
Oh.
We'll have more.
Is there
Well,
something
hopefully
you
we'll be
haven't
back.
said
We'll
about?
tell you
Okay.
all
Right. Yeah, I'll have you back on for sure.
We'll be back on.
Well, for all of you watching at home, thank you so much for your viewership. Please do think about liking and subscribing. And you all have a great game out there, and please stay safe. I'll see you in the next episode.